Welcome, new and old friends. My name is 242, and tonight we continue our basement series. As the Raven dreams and dodge this A2, join me to tell this story yet again. Now turn off your lights, make sure your doors and windows are locked. Things are about to get spooky. As the werewolf inched even closer, I managed to croak, "Dad, it's me." His eyes widened with glee as he mouthed, "I know." I was never allowed into the basement. I finally found out why. Part 3. By FleetSteps. As I kneeled in the middle of the meadow, gun to my temple, I wondered how everything went to shit so fucking fast. Then I just remembered that my whole life was shit, and everything made sense. Colonel Braddis began shouting towards the trees again.
"You have exactly 10 seconds to show yourself before I turn this young boy's brains into jelly. 10, 9...
I winced as the soldier pointing the rifle at me dug the barrel into my temple. Once I'd refused to tell them where Tom was. Only because I didn't know. They dragged me into the middle of the clearing and started this shit.
8, 7, 6...
I wondered if Tom was even still around.
5, 4...
I wonder what it was like to die. Maybe it's just like hopping universes. An endless bliss of nothing.
3, 2...
Forgive me, May.
1...
Just then, I heard Tom shout from somewhere among the tree line.
"Fuck's sake, Helena, he's just a fucking kid."
Tom called out as he emerged from the forest, hands high in the air. Helena? Tom knew this bitch? Honestly, I'm surprised he came out to my rescue, seeing as I had threatened to kill him if he wouldn't take me here just a bit ago. Colonel Braddis's eyes widened as the rest of the soldiers converged on Tom, forcing him to his knees. She approached him with awe, and the soldier with a gun to my head dragged me along. My body screamed in pain from all the injuries I had sustained.
I truly can't believe my eyes. Tommy, is that you? It is you, ain't it? Tom Lansing in the fucking flesh.
She gave what looked to be an actual, genuine smile.
You got old, Tommy.
Tommy? What the fuck? Colonel Braddis approached Tom and gently placed her hand on the side of his face. Neither of them said anything for a moment, and it was clear a lot of unspoken words were exchanged. Tom seemed almost embarrassed, while the colonel looked unmistakably sad before noticeably becoming angry. Finally, Tom opened his mouth to speak, but he was cut off by Colonel Brass's gentle touch, becoming a harsh blow to his face. She struck him again and again. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Just then, the colonel raised a hand to her ear, and I noticed she had a small earpiece in. She listened intently for a moment and then began barking orders at the soldiers. The ones not securing Tom and I bolted into action and began packing everything up. She turned back to Tom, who began to speak.
"I never meant for it to happen like that, Helena. You know,
Colonel Braddis held up a hand, and the soldier closest to him slammed the butt of his rifle into Tom's head. He collapsed forward onto the ground and let out a long moan.
All this time, And still nothing but empty lies.
Colonel Bradis spat.
You took something that belonged to me. You tried to kill me. We don't have time anyways. My pilot just tagged a horde of them things coming right at us just a few moments ago. As much as I'd love to watch you get torn to shreds, I don't think the higher-ups would be too happy.
Just then, I heard the purr of a rapidly approaching engine. I stared in awe at the hovercraft making its way over the meadow. It was shaped like an oblong spaceship, with a huge whirling fan on its belly, and two more jutting out from the back. As it began to land on the other side of the meadow, legs extended from the craft body, keeping the whole thing a few feet off the ground. One side of the craft was open and had no door, similar to what you see on a military helicopter. The soldiers flew into motion, quickly packing up those cannon weapons and dragging Tom and I into the hovercraft. I screamed and held back tears as my still dislocated arm was yanked in front of me and thick metal cuffs were slapped on my wrists. Rows of seats with windows lined the inside, with an open pilot's compartment in the front. As they loaded me up, I glanced into the pilot's area and was surprised to see it looked fairly straightforward, with only a touchscreen and a steering unit. I was shoved into the window seat opposite the opening in the craft behind Tom, just as an inhuman howls permeated through the trees. The soldiers froze for a moment before jumping back into action. If I thought they were rushing before, they were in overdrive now. The howls of the creatures were getting louder and more numerous. I suspected dozens of them were nearby. Even with the weaponry these soldiers had, it was far too many to fight. From my spot in the craft, I could look out the opening and see the soldier tasked with securing the orb. It was the medic who had injected me with a syringe. He had dumped some of the medical contents of his duffel bag on the ground, desperately trying to make room for the orb. The sound of the mutants was becoming deafening, and he was moving frantically. His hands were noticeably shaking, and he was having troubles with a caught zipper on the bag. The first of the mutants cleared the tree line, and Colonel Bradis started screaming at him from the entrance of the craft. The soldier grabbed the still open bag and began running as fast as he could manage. For a moment, he seemed like he'd make it, but the bag was bouncing wildly as he sprinted, and the goddamn orb bounced right out of the bag and onto the ground, rolling a few feet away. Colonel Bradis started shouting obscenities at the men inside the craft, and a few of them jumped out and opened fire on the creature closest to the medic. They downed it, but several more had entered the clearing now. The medic dropped the bag and grabbed the orb, continuing his sprint towards us. The hovercraft began to rise, and Colonel Bradis turned her fury towards the fearful pilot, demanding he stop the ascent. He began arguing with her, and they exchanged some angry words before the colonel pointed her gun at him. The pilot angrily slammed a button on the touchscreen, and the craft's ascent halted. A few more men jumped out and opened fire, but the mutants were flowing into the meadow in mass. The man carrying the orb was moving fast, but still 30 feet away or so. It was clear he wouldn't make it. One of the creatures took a leap and sailed through the air, landing directly on top of the soldier. The orb went careening away, landing with a dull thud. It must have been sturdier than the glass-like appearance made it seem, because it sat unharmed where it landed, though it was quickly engulfed by the startling close herd of mutants charging towards us. The colonel was still shouting. The rest of the soldiers who had jumped out to help the medic were trying to reboard the craft, but the pilot had begun to raise the craft again and had taken it a little too high for them. 3 of them jumped for the opening and began to heave themselves inside. Mutants leaped in the air towards the craft, grabbing a hold of 2 of them, dragging them back down to the ground. Their screams as they were eaten alive echoed through the air. The 3rd soldier was slightly luckier, or so I thought. A mutant had jumped through and bitten his leg clean off instead of dragging him back down with it. Another soldier pulled him inside the craft before Colonel Braddis promptly shot the wounded man through the head. A look of disgust filled her face as she used her foot to push him back out the opening. She smiled when she saw my horrified expression.
What? All my serum is down there with my medic.
We were about 20 feet in the air when a particularly large mutant made a bounding leap for the open door that was thankfully opposite of me. The craft lurched violently as the front half of the mutant landed inside, scrambling to find purchase. It dug its long claws into the side of the soldier closest to it, the same one who had just pulled in his friend. The soldier began to scream before Colonel Braddis used her pistol to put several bullets through the mutant's head. Its lifeless body slid out, dragging the still screaming man with it. As the craft gained altitude, I was able to see just how wrong my assumption of the mutants' numbers were. There were not dozens entering the meadow like I had assumed. There were hundreds. A sea of withering gray and yellow all crawling over each other. And somewhere down below in all of that was the orb. My only way home. My only way to save May. If you're enjoying this video, hit that like button and make sure it feels it. Hey, don't forget to leave a comment and tell me what you think down below. I laid shackled to the bed as my son prepared to show off his party trick to his guests. The guests all gasped as he shot himself in his head and collapsed to the floor. But they all started cheering as he once again crawled out of my body. We flew in silence. Every time I tried to speak, I was met with a hard hit from a soldier next to me. So, finally, I just stopped trying. Colonel Braddis was on the other side of the craft, staring at me, looking furious. Fortunately, my seat had a window, which gave me something to look at, other than her scowling gaze. For a while, we flew over a forest that seemed to stretch on forever. After about an hour, we began to approach a city, and I was again reminded of how much further along this universe had been. Apart from regular buildings and skyscrapers, the city boasted a futuristic highway system with shiny tunnels creating a maze between it all. Once we got closer, I could see just how well and truly fucked this place really was. Buildings and skyscrapers were destroyed, windows shattered everywhere. The long tunnels intertwining through the city were blown apart and missing sections everywhere. Dead vehicles and rubble littered the streets. Scorch marks covered almost every surface. The smell of death filled my nostrils as we passed over it all. Packs of mutants could be seen roaming the streets, their howls floating up to the craft as our pilot weaved through the city. It was desolate. This world was dead. I heard soft crying from in front of me where Tom was sitting as he watched the scenery below. I felt a pang of regret. Coming back here and seeing all of this had to be painful, if not outright traumatizing. More than that, I was the one who forced him back here. I couldn't see him well from my seat, save for the small opening between his seat and the wall of the craft where part of his head was visible. He was hunched away from the soldier next to him. I wasn't sure, but he looked to be holding a pen, scribbling on something. We began to approach what looked like a military compound on the outskirts of the city. 40-foot tall, mile-long walls surrounding a splattering of buildings. I could make out more soldiers along the top of the walls with those portable cannons, and thunderous crack sounds as they opened fire on any of the mutants who got too close. I wondered if this was a constant way of life. Had these people really been repelling the mutants day in and day out for years? How did they not run out of bullets or food? Along the side of one of the walls were big letters reading, "New United Syndication for Welcomation." I guess that's what NUSR stood for. The craft touched down on a large helipad in the middle of the compound, and I could see more people walking to and from the buildings. Once the engine stopped, Tom and I were forcibly pushed outside the craft. We landed in a heap, and I screamed as Tom's weight landed on my dislocated shoulder. I was in so much pain, I almost didn't notice Tom shoved his hand inside my back pocket. Soldiers hurled us to our feet, and I tried to catch Tom's eye, but he stared silently at the ground, unwilling to give away anything. After aiming their guns at us, the soldiers ordered us to face towards the hovercraft. On the shiny surface of the metal craft, I was able to get a look at my reflection. I wish I hadn't. What I saw horrified me. My nose was clearly broken, slanted very sharply. Large cuts filled my face, and dry blood was painting the entire front of my body. I was unrecognizable at this point. Too busy studying my horrendous reflection, I barely noticed Colonel Braddis shoot the pilot through the head as he exited the craft. His body landed inches away from my feet, and I jolted in surprise. The soldiers were still training their guns at us, and I didn't dare turn around. But through the reflection of the metal, I could see Colonel Braddis close her eyes and pinch the bridge of her nose in frustration. She waved her hand, and a few of the soldiers grabbed the now dead pilot and began dragging him off to wherever they drag off dead people in this fucked up place.
Find me a new pilot, please.
She told one of her men, who promptly hurried off.
One that follows orders.
She added. Colonel Braddis ordered me and Tom to turn around. Most of the soldiers had cleared out, and only a few remained, with their guns aimed steadily towards us. Further away, I could see a soldier and a few people in lab coats had stopped to stare. One of them, a woman with long, dark hair, locked eyes with me, and concern filled her face. She finally looked away when the soldier began ushering them forward towards a large, gray building. Colonel Braddis snapped her fingers in front of my face twice.
Hey, me. Look at me. Next time I snap, you die.
She said in a very serious tone. I nodded. I knew she wasn't joking. She took a deep breath before speaking, this time addressing Tom.
Despite everything, I really am happy to see you, Tommy.
She paused for a moment.
But I'm more unhappy about having to leave the bridge back there and losing so many men. I'm not as patient as I used to be. I'm out of time. And I'm gonna need answers from you. tell me you understand.
You were ever patient?
Tom didn't miss a beat. The colonel let out a shrill laugh. And then she turned her pistol towards me and put a bullet through my injured shoulder. Agony sliced through me and I dropped to the ground. Maybe due to shock, but I was unable to even scream. Tears filled my eyes, blurring my vision. Colonel Braddis scratched her head and began again. This time using that disgusting, fake, sweet voice from earlier.
It's been so long, and I just can't believe you talk to me like that.
Not long enough.
Tom's voice was dripping with venom.
I should have killed you when I had the chance. You sadistic, vile, evil spawn of a swine fucking whore. You know why I left you here to die? Because your head is broke. So fucking broke that even I can't fix it. You're more fucked up than a clock with no numbers, and I couldn't have your vileness infecting a whole nother goddamn innocent universe.
Colonel Braddis simply nodded as if getting confirmation on what she already knew. Tom looked down at me with sadness in his eyes.
I hate to say I told you so,
he said with a wink.
Good luck, kid.
Colonel Braddis once again fired her gun, this time right into Tom's temple. My great-uncle's lifeless body dropped to the ground in front of me with a thud. Eyes open and unfocusing. Blood pooled out from the hole in his head.
Someone find me a new fucking medic, too. Make sure this kid don't bleed out.
Colonel Braddis shouted. As people rushed to save my life, the true gravity of my situation began to sink in. I was so far in over my fucking head, it was laughable. Tom was dead, and I surely wasn't far behind. My sister was going to turn into a monster, and quite possibly be patient zero for a mutant apocalypse on my world. I had completely and totally failed. Despite the excruciating pain I was in and my severe blood loss, I began to thrash against the hands on me. I launched every single threat and insult I knew at the Colonel, and she just stood there, unfazed, wearing an amused look. The only thing that made me eventually stop was when someone stuck a needle in my neck and my world faded to darkness. Every day for the past 30 years, I've gone to work for the big plant at the outskirts of town. Soon, its roots will reach beneath every home, its flowers will bloom, and my neighbors will go to work for it too. It seems things are getting interesting. I hope you come back for the next installment. Thank you, As the Raven Dreams and Dodge This 82 for helping me. Both of the links are down below and will be on the screen as well. I wanted to say sorry for not uploading last week. I did post on Twitter that I wouldn't be able to do anything. If you like to keep up to date, that's the best place. Check out my tree link down below to get all my links. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and make sure it feels it. Subscribe if you're new. If you like to help this channel, share it with anyone who might enjoy it. And I also have merch and a Patreon if you're interested. Most of all, leave me a comment of what you think, and you can even use the word of the day to help you out. Now onto the word of the week. Last week, I only got one entry from PA Nightmares. Every time we take the mic, we represent ourselves and the authors we read the stories of. Few represent this better than my dear friend 42. Thank you so much, PA. So I do hope I get more this time, but again, thank you, PA. That was really good. So this word is conviction. CONVICTION. And it means a formal declaration that someone is guilty of a criminal offense, made by the verdict of a jury or the decision of a judge in a court of law. Or it can mean a firmly held belief or opinion. So use the word conviction down below if you're on YouTube, or if you're on the podcast, go to Twitter and @ me and I'll read it next week. But as always, guys, thank you for listening and watching. It's really amazing. You guys are just awesome. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.